Meet Sarah. Sarah is 34. She makes $95,000 a year, she has a solid credit score, and she has spent the last 6 years doing everything the personal finance internet told her to do. She paid off her student loans early. She has no credit card debt. She drives a used car she bought with cash. She has an emergency fund with 6 months of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account. And every month, she puts whatever is left over toward her mortgage because her goal is to own her home outright by the time she's 45. Sarah has done everything right. And Sarah is quietly, systematically getting poorer. Not because she's spending too much, not because she's making bad decisions, but because the framework she's been given, debt is bad, pay it off fast, own things outright, is the framework designed for people who will never be wealthy. The people who are actually building generational wealth are operating on a completely different set of rules. Rules that, once you understand them, will make everything you've ever been told about debt feel like it was written by someone who wanted you to stay exactly where you are. So today, we're going to talk about those rules. And I want to be very clear up front. This is not financial advice. Some of this will feel uncomfortable. Some of it will feel wrong. And some of it, when the mechanism clicks, will make you quietly furious. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about debt that nobody explains correctly. The question is never, is this debt? The question is always, what does this debt buy? Because there are two completely different kinds of debt in the world, and the personal finance industry has spent decades treating them like they're the same thing. The first kind of debt buys things that go down in value: cars, vacations, consumer electronics. The second kind of debt buys things that go up in value and generate income while they do it: a rental property, a business, an investment portfolio. The first kind of debt makes you poorer. The second kind of debt, when used correctly, makes you richer. And the wealthy don't avoid debt. They are addicted to the second kind. Which brings us to the mechanism that almost nobody explains in plain English. The United States government does not tax borrowed money. Not a dollar, not a cent. When you earn $100,000 at your job, the IRS takes roughly a third of it before it touches your bank account. When you borrow $100,000 against an asset you own, you get the full $100,000. No tax event, no income classification. The loan just sits there on your personal balance sheet while the $100,000 sits in your account ready to invest. And as long as you never sell the underlying asset, the capital gains on that asset never get taxed either. The wealthy figured this out decades ago. USC law professor Ed McCaffrey gave it a name in the 1990s. He called it buy, borrow, die. And the name sounds morbid, but the mechanism is almost poetic. Buy appreciating assets. Borrow against them tax-free to fund your life and your next investments. Die holding the assets. And when you do, your heirs inherit them with a stepped-up cost basis, meaning the capital gains that accumulated over an entire lifetime of appreciation are permanently erased at the moment of inheritance. The debt wasn't a burden. The debt was the tax avoidance vehicle. The whole time. And in case you think this is theory, here's what it looks like in practice. Morgan Stanley's wealthy management clients currently hold $68.1 billion in non-mortgage securities-based loans. That number has doubled since 2016. These are people who own stock portfolios, who need cash, and who instead of selling the stock and paying capital gains tax, borrow against the portfolio at low interest rates and keep the stocks compounding. The loan is not income. The stocks keep growing. The dividends keep arriving. The capital gains clock never starts. And Bank of America's Wealth Management Division saw a 50% increase in this exact type of lending from 2019 to 2022. This is not a niche strategy. This is the operating system of modern American wealth. It just doesn't get covered in articles about paying off your credit card faster. But that's just one piece of the mechanism, because there's a second force running simultaneously that most people are completely unaware of. And it's the one that makes fixed-rate debt genuinely strange when you understand it correctly. Inflation erodes debt, not metaphorically. Literally, if you borrow $300,000 to buy a house today at a fixed interest rate, the nominal amount you owe never changes. In 20 years, you still owe roughly $300,000 minus whatever you've paid down. But the dollars you're using to repay that loan will be worth significantly less than the dollars you originally borrowed. Inflation has been running at roughly 3 to 4% annually for the past several years. At 3% inflation, a dollar today is worth about 74 cents in 10 years, which means you are paying back a loan with money that is progressively cheaper relative to the money you borrowed. Simultaneously, the asset you bought with that loan, the house, is repricing upward with inflation. The debt shrinks in real terms. The asset grows in nominal terms. You are on the winning side of both movements at once. A University of Chicago research study found that most people are genuinely unaware of this dynamic, and when they were informed of it, they changed their behavior. They preferred more fixed-rate debt, not less, and wanted longer fixed periods, because once you understand that inflation is silently working to reduce the real cost of your fixed borrowing every single day, debt stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a partnership with the Federal Reserve. A partnership where the Fed prints money, inflation runs, and the real value of your fixed-rate debt quietly dissolves while your asset base expands. The people who understood this in 1971, when 30-year fixed mortgages averaged 7.5%, paid back those loans with $1981 that had already been significantly devalued. They got richer while they slept. Not because they were smart, because they understood the mechanism. Now let's talk about the third force, because this is the one that is most powerful, least understood, and most recently turbocharged by a quiet act of Congress: depreciation. When you buy a rental property with borrowed money, the IRS allows you to deduct the theoretical wear and tear on that building over time, even if the property is actually appreciating in value. Residential rental properties depreciate over 27.5 years for tax purposes. Commercial properties over 39. But here's where it gets interesting. There is a strategy called cost segregation, where an engineering firm physically analyzes a building and reclassifies its components into shorter depreciation schedules. Wiring, plumbing, flooring, fixtures, landscaping. These are reclassified from 39-year to 5, 7, or 15-year depreciation schedules. And in January 2025, Congress reinstated 100% bonus depreciation, meaning all of those reclassified components can be fully expensed in year 1 instead of spread over 5 or 15 years. Here's what that looks like in numbers. On a $5 million commercial property, if $2 million of it qualifies for cost segregation acceleration, you can generate a $2 million tax deduction in the first year of ownership. At a 37% tax bracket, that's $740,000 in tax savings from a single property in year 1. On a building that may be simultaneously going up in value, you are generating a paper loss against a real gain. The IRS calls this depreciation. Wealthy real estate investors call it their favorite thing in the tax code. And the ROI on the cost segregation study itself, which costs roughly $8,000 to $12,000 to commission, is currently running at 25 to 30 times the investment. And the crucial detail, all of this only works if you bought the property with debt, because the debt gave you the asset. The asset gave you the depreciation gave you the tax shield. Remove the debt from the beginning of that chain and the entire mechanism collapses. The debt wasn't the cost of entry. The debt was the activating ingredient. Now let me put all three forces together, because this is the part that makes the whole thing click. Force 1. Borrowed money is untaxed. You access capital without a tax event, keep assets compounding, and use loans to fund investments that generate more income than the interest costs. Force 2. Inflation erodes fixed-rate debt. Every year, the real value of what you owe decreases while the real value of what you own increases. You are paid to borrow in real terms in any environment where asset appreciation exceeds your fixed interest rate. Force 3. Depreciation creates paper losses against real gains. The government allows you to record a tax loss on an asset that is growing in value, and that paper loss shields your income from taxation. Three forces, running simultaneously, all triggered by the same original decision to borrow money instead of avoiding it. This is what economists call the triple arbitrage. And it's not a coincidence that these three mechanisms exist together. They were all written into the tax code deliberately, at different points in American history. By people who own the assets, these rules benefit. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. The question is only whether you're on the side that benefits from it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sarah, who spent 6 years paying off debt early and building toward owning her home outright, did none of this. She has no assets generating depreciation. She has no borrowed capital compounding in an investment account. She has no fixed rate debt being eroded by inflation, while an appreciating asset sits on the other side of the equation. She has a paid off car, a smaller mortgage balance, and a savings account that inflation is quietly destroying at roughly 3 to 4% per year. She followed the rules. She just followed the wrong rules. The personal finance framework most people operate on was built for people living paycheck to paycheck, where consumer debt is genuinely dangerous and where the first priority is stability. That framework is correct for that situation, but it gets applied universally, as if the rules for surviving financially and the rules for building wealth were the same thing. They are not. And the gap between the two frameworks is where the rich get richer while everyone else wonders why following the rules didn't work. The counterintuitive truth about debt is that it is neither good nor bad. It is a tool. The same tool that destroys financial lives when used to buy depreciating consumer goods is the same tool that builds generational wealth when used to acquire appreciating, income-generating assets in a tax code that was specifically designed to reward people who understand how to use it. The debt isn't the problem. The asset on the other side of the debt is what determines everything. So here's where I want to hear from you. Do you think A, this framework is the real playbook, and the reason most people don't build wealth isn't income or discipline? It's that they've been given the wrong mental model about debt from the beginning. Or do you think B, this is only realistic for people who already have capital, the depreciation and borrowing strategies require significant assets to activate, and the advice to avoid debt is still correct for most people because most people don't have a $5 million commercial property sitting around? Or C, the option I find most interesting. Both frameworks are right for different stages. Avoiding consumer debt is the correct first move, but at some point the rules change and the people who keep playing the avoid all debt game past that inflection point are the ones who end up asset poor in retirement, while their more leveraged neighbors compound their way to a different outcome entirely. Drop your take in the comments.